Hey guys, we got some great news to talk about. So it would seem that Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, is actually supposed to be seen as a trilogy. Now, I covered this in a video before the game came out because the actual director of Star Wars Jedi Survivor has expressed this in interest, telling IGN, "I always wanted to see this as a trilogy." So clearly the story has just entered its middle phase, and we're really halfway there. And even beyond this, we could possibly get even more games following Cal Kestis' journey. But my theory on where Jedi Survivor 3, or whatever they're going to call it, Jedi something, will go, is that it's going to follow a bit of a model of God of War. Now, the God of War games are some of my favorite games of all time, particularly God of War 4 and God of War 5 Ragnarok. Now, if you aren't familiar with these games, it's basically a father and son kind of dynamic. They just happen to be gods. And so now what I think is going to happen is Cal is obligated pretty much to take care of Kata. And Kata is Bode's daughter. Now, she may have force powers, she may not. But as we know in Star Wars, they may manifest later on in life. And at the end of the game, we saw Seer actually mention that he needs to take care of Kata, of the girl, and make sure she grows up right. You know, her father was pretty off the deep end, so Cal's gonna have his work cut out for him, where he's gonna have to make sure that he is a good role model to her, so that he doesn't fail, and this could essentially be his apprentice. This could be his Ahsoka. And that's what I think they might do, is they're going to sort of take the same model as God of War 5, where you follow the game as, of course, Cal Kestis, but you have Kata as your sidekick. And then once the game ends, Cal Kestis probably goes on his own journey or dies or whatever might happen, and Kata goes on to continue sort of the legacy, much like they did in, spoilers, God of War Ragnarok, where Kratos goes on his own journey and Atreus now is going to be running the franchise pretty much as we know. Now, personally, what I'd like to see in the game is for Cal Kestis to focus more on the Empire. This game had a very big influence of the High Republic, and I feel like there was a lot with the Empire that we didn't see. It wasn't really too Empire-centric, much like the first one was, which really helps bolster Revenge of the Sith and lead us into A New Hope, because everything is about the Empire around this time. Now, of course, this was a very fresh take. It definitely added a little bit more lore to the Star Wars timeline. However, going forwards, I would love it if Cal came into some trouble with the Empire himself. Or perhaps the Empire had discovered something that Cal Kestis really didn't want them to get their hands on. This, of course, could be Tanalorr, you know, the direction to Tanalorr, or it could be his discovery of Exegol, if they want to tie it into the sequel trilogy, or it could just be a new list of Force-sensitive children around the galaxy that the Empire has their hands on. We could see Cal going into some sort of a Imperial base, and maybe this place could be on some sort of a Sith planet, could be Korriban. Maybe we go to the Valley of the Dark Lords, and we have to infiltrate a Sith temple. I think focusing on something to do with Old Republic, maybe Sith Temple, is something we haven't really discovered yet in Star Wars all that much. So I would really think it would be super refreshing if we go in there, and at this point Kata is starting to get a little bit influenced perhaps with the dark side or dark side teachings, and maybe they set free some ancient dark side user or ancient Sith or something. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. And I think this overall dynamic of Kata wanting to turn to the dark side, or perhaps being influenced, or Cal basically giving his interpretation of the light side versus the dark side to Kata, could be explaining to us as we're playing the game the new interpretation, I think, of Cal Kestis and the new Jedi, as I like to think of it, and their interpretation of the dark and light sides. Because as we know, things really were pretty dogmatic with the time of the Republic. In the prequel trilogy, the Jedi were extremely dogmatic when it came to the Force. It was almost like they were afraid of using any sort of emotion whatsoever because it could lead them to the dark side. Whereas Luke in Legends was very adamant about using your emotions or using any aspect of the Force so long as you don't succumb to the dark side, so long as you control yourself. You know, attachments aren't really forbidden, they're encouraged if anything, much like how he ended up with Mara Jade. Now, of course, that's Legends, but I'd love to see some incorporation of that because it allows for a lot of flexibility in the Star Wars timeline and in the mythos. which just makes it a little bit more fun. And as we've seen, Cal is already using the dark side, so things are about to get even more interesting as he battles with his own darkness. Now, there was an excerpt in one of the books for the prequels, I believe it was the Attack of the Clones book, where Mace Windu is talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi about how he created Vapod to channel the darkness within himself. Or maybe it might have even been Shatterpoint by Matthew Stover. Now, creating a whole lightsaber form that focuses on your own darkness within to channel that and use it for good is maybe something that Cal Kestis will have to learn in the next game. Because as we know, now that he's battling this dark side emotion that he has, which we can now unleash, much like God of War, using, your rage, your Spartan rage, which is really what it reminded me of. I think we're about to head into some really deep waters with understanding Sith lore as Cal comes to terms with the fact that he needs to maybe understand a different aspect of the Force and a different aspect of himself now that he has these emotions and he's really tasted the dark side quite a bit now. As Yoda has said, if you taste the dark side, it's going to be a very difficult journey back to the light. And this is what happened to Anakin Skywalker in episode 2. When his mother died, he went to the dark side. And this was really his first big step into using the dark side. And after that, it's really downhill from there for him because he's just so used to using this power and his emotions to fuel him. And of course, as we saw again in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin used his dark side when Dooku was taunting him and telling him, you have hate, you have anger, but you don't use them. Boom, Anakin uses a bit of the dark side, opens up that furnace heart that he has, as Matthew Stover likes to call it, and he just goes absolutely insane. So I think understanding a lot more about the dark side and maybe venturing into some Sith temples or some Sith planets would be something really interesting that I would like to see in the next game. That being said, there also is the possibility of Cal Kestis becoming the next Starkiller. Now that he has opened himself up to the dark side, Vader can manipulate him, possibly to use more of that dark side energy and more of the dark side of the Force. And this in turn could literally give us Darth Vader's secret apprentice as Cal Kestis, and we could follow another game where Vader is training Cal. And we're going totally off another fan fiction here, but I think that would be pretty freaking cool. Yes, we have Force Unleashed, but we all know they're never going to touch that game again. And if they do, man, that'll be the day. But what if we follow that story and Cal Kestis is now in the dark side, he's been training under Vader and doing his bidding. And then we have Kata and Marin who are together in their own story, and they want to try and bring Cal back to the light. I think that would be a beautiful story in itself, and it could be pretty awesome to see and play, for sure. It would be a very emotional game. So let me know what you think about these two possible or several possible storylines for the game, and I'd love to read your comments and see what you guys think. Maybe the developers are checking out some of these comments too, you never know. Anyways, I think they did a fantastic job with the second game, as they did with the first one, so whatever direction they want to take in the third game, I know we're all going to love it, and we're all going to have a great time streaming it. I can't wait. It's probably going to be another 3-4 years away, so, I'm guessing 2026 or 2027, but hey, well worth it, and I know that the final product is going to be absolutely amazing. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Star Wars Theory. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.